History is never neutral. It is written by those with power, ambition, and often self-interest. For centuries, Arabs have been described and analyzed through the eyes of outsiders: the crusaders, the colonialists, the Orientalists, the imperialists, those whose very goal was to dominate, exploit, or justify domination. And in their writings, the Arabs were reduced to a caricature: chaotic, exotic, primitive, or simply the other. But what happens when the storyteller is the oppressor? When the narrative itself is a tool of conquest, control, or cultural erasure? Walter Benjamin, the German philosopher and theorist, said, "History is written by the victors, not the truth seekers." So can we trust these accounts? The answer is obvious. Trust in these cases is not only misplaced, it is dangerous. Accepting a history written to justify oppression is a moral compromise. It perpetuates the power dynamics that produced it, even centuries later. This is why revisionist history for Arabs is not a luxury or a whim. It is a moral obligation. Revisiting historical narratives is an act of justice. It is a necessary response to centuries of distorted storytelling. And it is precisely in this context that efforts like the Kandari Chronicles become indispensable. They are not revisionist in the sense of fabrication. They are revisionist in the sense of restoring balance, truth, and ethical clarity to narratives that were systematically manipulated. Before we go further, it's imperative to identify that the Arab story has been told by non-Arabs for many centuries. The detailed history of how the West misrepresented the Arab story has already been explored in depth in another video, and therefore I won't dive into that abyss at the moment. I've placed a link to that video above for those who want to see that full analysis, where we dissected how scholars, institutions, and media, both old and new, deliberately enforced controls, biases, and suppression to serve the narrative of the various hegemonic Western powers of the time. For this video essay, the focus is different. Here, we will explore why revisionist history is morally necessary, how the Kandari Chronicles and similar channels embody this corrective approach, and what it means for Arabs today to reclaim intellectual agency over their past. Revisionist history is often mischaracterized. Critics argue that it is biased, that it distorts or invents, and sometimes be even apologetic. But this misunderstands the nature of revision when it is justified, when the original accounts were written by those with immoral intent, by conquerors, colonizers, or cultural imperialists. Correction is not bias, it is ethics. Consider the Crusader Chronicles. They were written not merely to record events, but to glorify conquest, vilify the Arab or Muslim populations, and justify the taking of land, wealth, and lives. The Orientalists of the 19th century, while claiming objectivity, framed Arabs as backward, irrational, or incapable of sophisticated thought, while simultaneously praising European civility and intellect. Colonial historians painted a picture of Arabs as weak, divided, and in need of guidance, providing a convenient moral justification for domination. These histories were not neutral. They were designed to serve the oppressor. To accept them as truth is to accept a moral lie. Revisionist history, in contrast, is an attempt to remove the moral distortion, to uncover what was deliberately hidden or misrepresented. It is a form of justice, not only intellectual, but moral, cultural, and ethical. Andreas Hillgruber, the German historian, said it best. Historical revisionism is a natural and essential part of the historiographical process. Revisionist history, then, is not a game of academic one-upmanship. It is a responsibility. Every historian, every scholar, and every intellectual has a duty to ask, who wrote this? For whom? With what intention? When the answer reveals bias, manipulation, or malice, revision is not optional. It is required. The Kandari Chronicles is more than a creator of digital content about a certain cross-section of Arabness or Muslimness. It is a responsibility. Its mission is to correct the deeply ingrained Western narratives that have long misrepresented Arabs or Muslims, while simultaneously reminding the Arab and Muslim world of its enduring values, achievements, and identity. For generations, many have been conditioned to accept depictions that exaggerate divisions, downplay accomplishments, or impose moral judgments to justify conquest. Therefore, it's important to confront these distortions with rigorous scholarship and ethical clarity, empowering Arabs and Muslims to reclaim intellectual and cultural agency over their own history. At the same time, it restores awareness of the qualities that have historically defined Arab civilization: the pursuit of knowledge, the cultivation of justice, resilience, and a strong sense of community. By reconnecting Arabs with this heritage, it does more than correct facts. It rekindles confidence, pride, and a sense of moral continuity. In this way, revisiting history becomes not merely an academic exercise, but a profound cultural and ethical responsibility. I really do appreciate you taking the time and watching the Kandari Chronicles. Please do join our community by subscribing so that you don't miss out on any content regarding the Arab and Muslim history, identity, and modern condition. And if you really do enjoy the channel week in and week out and would like to support us even further, please do join us at our YouTube membership program as well as on Patreon. Thanks again. To further understand why correction is necessary, we must examine the recurring patterns of Western distortion and their long-term consequences. Across centuries, certain strategies have consistently appeared in narratives about Arabs, exaggerating divisions, minimizing achievements, and framing Arabs as the other. These distortions were not incidental. They were deliberate mechanisms to justify conquest, exploitation, and moral superiority. One striking example is the intellectual theft and appropriation of Arab discoveries. Consider Ibn Haytham, whose groundbreaking work on optics laid the foundations for modern scientific understanding. European scholars later claimed or repackaged these findings, erasing or diminishing Ibn Haytham's contributions. This was not merely a historical oversight, it was a deliberate suppression of Arab intellectual legacy to position Europe as the inheritor of global knowledge. These distortions extend far beyond intellectual achievements. Facts have been omitted, obscured, or twisted to suit political agendas. A stark contemporary example is the history of Palestine. Narratives presented by Zionist historiography often erase centuries of Arab presence, dispossessing the people of their own history while framing the occupation as inevitable or justified. Western accounts frequently ignore or minimize displacement, dispossession, and resistance, creating a moral and historical vacuum in which the oppressor's version becomes dominant. The consequences of these distortions are profound. Generations of Arabs have internalized skewed perceptions of their own history, questioning their identity, their achievements, and even their ethical framework. A quote by George Orwell comes to mind here. The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. Meanwhile, misrepresentations provide justification for ongoing cultural, political, and territorial injustices. Knowledge, once a source of empowerment, has been weaponized against the people whose accomplishments it originally celebrated. Revisionist history, therefore, is not an academic indulgence. It is a moral and intellectual necessity. It restores truth where it was suppressed. It honors contributions where they were stolen, and brings to light facts deliberately omitted or misrepresented. It challenges the narratives that continue to shape public perception and policy, insisting that justice, clarity, and historical integrity are restored. So, as I said, revisionist history is not just an academic exercise. It is a call to action. Arabs today have both the resources and the responsibility to engage critically with their past. This mandates the questioning of dominant historical narratives rather than accepting them at face value. Studying primary sources whenever or wherever possible, including Arabic manuscripts, letters, and local accounts, and recognizing the moral and ethical dimension of historical storytelling. In practice, this engagement strengthens identity, cultural awareness, and intellectual independence. It challenges the legacy of centuries of distortion and reminds us that history is not a passive inheritance, but an active responsibility. This is not about rewriting history for pride or revenge. It is about accountability, honesty, and justice. History written with bias is injustice. History revisited with truth is the restoration of integrity. The act of revisiting historical narratives is, in essence, a moral one. When the original record was shaped by power, ambition, or malice, correction is a duty. The Kandari Chronicles and other channels on YouTube or other platforms exemplifies this duty, offering a meticulous, evidence-based approach to uncovering truth and challenging centuries of misrepresentation. By engaging with history critically, Arabs reclaim agency over their past. They restore dignity to their ancestors, context to their achievements, and clarity to the record. Quoting Orwell again, he says, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." Revisionist history is not a challenge to truth. It is a pursuit of it. History written with bias is, as I said, injustice. History revisited with rigor and moral clarity is a restoration of integrity. It is a responsibility that belongs to every scholar, every thinker, and every Arab who refuses to let the narratives of conquerors define their civilization. To confront history ethically is to confront power, bias, and misrepresentation. And in doing so, we honor not only the past, but the moral imperative of truth itself.